Alright, welcome back. This is the second video for the tutorial series. What I'm going to do in this one, it's going to be a much shorter video than the previous one, is I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the battlefield. Again, for those who are returning to the game, who are relatively familiar with the game, this may not be helpful to you. The last video went a bit longer than I anticipated. So, again, if you're familiar with the game and you don't need a refresher on the battlefield map and what all the different things are for that, feel free to skip forward to the third video in this series. And with that, we're going to jump into just a very simple one. We're going to go to Stay Alert here. I didn't build up my army at all, by the way, because I'm not going to fight this. But so a couple things I want to focus on here for the preview map before we jump into the actual battle. Is it going to give you an overview of the game, or of the battle, rather. It's going to give you information of the enemy. So this is where your reconnaissance that I was talking about in the last video under the career tab can be helpful. So for every point that you put into recon, the more information you're going to get from this. Not really helpful for a little small battle like this, to be honest with you, because it's so small that it's like, it is what it is. But for the bigger battles, before you actually go into them, because the cool thing is you can go into this tab, you can see all this information and be like, oh, I need more troops. And then go back in, like restructure your core or whatever. So we can go into this and be like, oh, 7,000 troops against 15,000? What the hell? Let's go to camp and rebuild our army. Like, oh my god, I can only bring one corps here, and I don't have enough troops. Daniel, let's go back, put him in the first corps. And now my army's bigger. And then I go, okay, battle. Yay, stay alert. Oh, I have more troops now. Now it's closer. So just know that this information can be helpful for kind of the preliminary steps before actually getting on the battlefield. And if you feel like you need more troops or to restructure things, for example, maybe they have a crap ton of guns and you decide that, you know what, I need more artillery on the battlefield. You can go back to the camp menu, restructure your army, and then come back in here and do this. Okay, so that's where the recon is very helpful. Notice too, we can only bring 10 brigades into the battle, and if we get, it says we have 12, and the reason we have 12 under the first corps is we have 12. The nice thing is having this second empty core, because what you can do is for those smaller battles, you can say, okay, I can only bring 12 units to the battlefield. How am I going to deal with that? All right, well, this guy only has 3, so maybe we say, you know what, screw you, dude. Move him up there. I want, his gun there. I can only have 12. I like having the cavalry, but he's only 150 skirmishers. Let's get him out of there. Now you're guaranteed these 10 guys on the battlefield. If I had, for example, the skirmishers in the I Corps, and he was hanging out here, it's possible the game would say, I'm going to put those 150 skirmishers in the battle and exclude the 1,000, because you can't really... there might be a way to predict how these are, but I've never been able to figure it out. So that's what we're going to do. We got these 10. We go, oh, battle, yay, stay alert, boom. And then we go here. Now we got 10 out of 10, and we go to start battle. You can also do details too. Okay, the thing there that I skipped over, it is helpful if you're new to the game and you haven't played the battles before. It's going to give you a preview of what to expect. The expectations for the battle, where the enemy is potentially going to come from, some suggestions on how to conduct the battle, and then also what you need to kind of win the battle. But it's not necessary. It's a nice flavor to the battle, but I would say you could skip over it if you're kind of in a hurry and just want to get to the fighting. Then you notice you start off in this little box, and what you can do is you can move your guys around. It's basically the starting position for your troops, and you can kind of just move them around. You can also go down here. So I don't know where these guys are at, but oh, that's right. So these guys are not on the battlefield yet. So you only have 6 of your offensive units on the battlefield, and say for example we don't want the cavalry on here yet. We can take him out and put him instead. So if you right-click him, which is what I did, so I took him, and I right-clicked him. So cavalry, right-click, boom, removed. Now what I want to put there, hey, I want more artillery. Click the artillery tab down here, and then left-click. Boom, there's your artillery, right? And then left-click is to click and drag. Boop, 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 boop. So holding down the left-click button. So again, how do I do that? I said, hey, I want my cavalry off the battlefield, so I clicked them. Then I right-clicked, And then I said I want more artillery, so I clicked that, and then I left clicked. All right, so then you just click around, click and drag. If you read the tutorial information, I wouldn't say the tutorial, but the preliminary information for the battle, it'll tell you kind of where the enemy's coming from. And then what you can do is you can click and drag and say, okay, I want them in the housing area. As you can see there at the bottom left, depending on where you have them, it'll give you cover. So say, hey, we want, that's a good spot right there. We want more cover. Hey, 85 cover. We're going to go right there. 99 cover. Yeah, boom, okay. And so forth, okay? One of the things I really want to hone on here is if you do a tab, boop, 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 this thing right here, it's going to change. It's your view. So it alters the angle with which you look at the battle map. If you do it on a more straight-on approach, like we have it like this, you're not going to really be able to tell the landscape as effectively, so you're not going to be able to tell where the hills are, where the ravines are, that sort of thing. If you have it at a little bit more of an angle, you'll be able to see it better. Let's start the battle so I can pause. So if you zoom in here, you can see that this area here in the grass or in the trees is a little bit higher than the rest of the area. And if you scroll over here, you can tell this is like sloped down right here. It's not as obvious if you did that. So that's just kind of it's your matter of preference how you want to do it. You can also click it. It'll adjust it around. Here's your mini map. Definitely use that, because if you're playing like I do where you don't pause after you start the battle, this is going to be really helpful to tell you, hey, is there things going on that I'm not seeing right here? So, for example, if we're up here and we're watching Archer fight, and all of a sudden this guy down here, the Louisiana Tigers, is engaged, you're going to see some blue dots down here. I'm not going to see that just looking at the map. So you keep glancing down at this mini map. It's going to give you a lot of intel on what's going on. Up here, you want to look at, this is very, very, very important, okay? Because what's going to tell you in the preliminary screen is, hey, like take this strategic spot, which is going to be demonstrated by a flag, and maybe there's other ones, but it's not going to be clear to you that in order to get your victory, which we were talking about in the last episode, which dictates the amount of money you get, the amount of reputation you get, or the amount of reputation you lose, and the amount of recruits you get, is based on the objectives. This is going to really tell you, this is what's victory, this is what's a draw. Hold the supply point. Okay, got it. I need to hold the supply point to get a victory. If I can't hold the supply point, I need to inflict at least 15% more casualties than the enemy. So if I get a draw, that's not as bad as a defeat, obviously. I'm still going to get some money, still going to get recruits. I'm probably not going to lose reputation. But that's going to be the screen in the top right up here. I would definitely look at it. And it's also hotkey I. This is hotkey I. This up here, this ribbon up here, is going to tell you in terms of the victory screen, basically how you're doing in the battle overall. So if this is like basically up the middle, red, blue, then it's basically saying, hey, it's kind of it's a draw at the moment. Also, this is going to increase your recon. If you increase your recon skill, it's going to give you more information. I think it's going to be more accurate in terms of how are you doing kind of man-to-man, casualty to casualty. It's not altogether accurate if you don't have any reconnaissance points. So the lesson of that is, if this is like up the middle, but you don't have any, so it's like half blue, half red, but you don't have any recon skill, then that's very possible it's deceptive. It's not accurate. Why? Because you have no idea how many troops the enemy has brought. And so you may think you're killing as many of his as he's killing yours, which may be the case, but if he's got twice as many troops as you do, then instead of being up the middle, it's really kind of 3/4. Still, 3/4 him versus you. The time up here is really important, because what's going to happen is, let's see, does it tell you? Sometimes it's going to tell you like how late you need to hold. In the major battles like Shiloh, this is going to matter, because the fighting is going to continue until it's dark. So you're going to want to know what time it is, because if it's middle of the day, you've still got 6 more hours of fighting before the battle is over, perhaps, or the day is over. But if it's 7 p.m. at night, you should know that hey, the battle's winding down, or at least the day's fighting's winding down. I just need to hold on just a little bit longer. So kind of pay attention to the time. This over here is the amount of time you have for the actual battle. So for example, it's 6 a.m., but I think this is 3.5 hours of fighting. So this particular battle is not going to go to the end of the day. It's only going to go until about 9:30, which I'll demonstrate here real quick. Okay, so you notice now 3 hours and 27 minutes versus, and then 6:02. So that's going to correlate. So this is going to be the amount of time you have left in the battle. This is going to be the actual time of day. Obviously the year 1862. Now, what's a caveat on this is that even though it says 3 hours and 30 minutes, it does not necessarily mean that the battle will end at 3 hours and 30 minutes. So we may be holding this until, say, 3 hours and 15 minutes into the battle, and then we lose it. Well, if it's close, the game will give you more time to take it back. So it may say, hey, you can finish the battle now, or I'm giving you an extra 30 minutes game time, 30 minutes like up here, to get that position back. And so just kind of be aware of that this is going to be your countdown, but it's not a hard, fast rule necessarily depending on the battle you're in. And this is like your actual time in the battle, which is important to tell you, hey, is the day almost over, and is the day's battle almost over? Because that may not be indicative over here if it gets dark. The game very rarely will let you fight in the dark, if ever. It'll let you fight in dusk, but not at dark. Okay, bottom left here is going to be the different units you're clicking. So, for example, I'm going to go into this stuff in more detail in another video. I'm not going to cover it here. Just know that when you click a unit, it's demonstrated down here. So Logan's brigade is demonstrated down here. This little eye is very informative and I think very helpful. I would highly recommend you use it. So if you click it, it's going to tell you the type of gun they use, reminding you of the reload efficiency and melee for that particular gun, and then also your individual brigade, their different attributes. So it's going to be hard to remember all of them because you know, as you play the campaign further in, you're going to have a bigger army. And so this can be really helpful to say, I need to remember how effective is Logan. Boom, here you go. Versus Daniel, not nearly as good, right? Now, obviously the star next to the little icon, it's going to tell you that Logan is going to have a more experienced brigade than Daniel because he doesn't have a star. But again, it's going to tell you this information. What I find most helpful from this, honestly, isn't so much these things, because I could usually predict them based on the stars. Which, by the way, the star also will tell you what they're trained in. So if you have different brigades that are more melee focused than range focused, for example, that's where this would be helpful, is clicking the eye. If that's how you want to structure your army. But more importantly, it's the gun. You know, it tells you what kind of gun they use. And as you play the game more, you're going to know that, hey, a Lorenz is better than a farmer, and therefore if I have a brigade that has a Lorenz, I'm going to want to probably use them in situations where, you know, maybe musket fire. But if I want to charge, or if I want them to be a meat shield, then I'm going to want to grab a brigade that has farmers, and therefore, you know, in order to figure that out, I'm going to need the icon to figure that out, because without the icon activated, I don't know what type of musket Daniel's brigade is using. Right? It doesn't tell me. Unless I go, boop, there. Oh, hey, he's got farmers. Okay. Now, the one frustrating thing for me, at least, is that when I click I, it'll tell me the musket he uses, but then I have to unclick it to tell me this information. Now, this information is very important. Morale, obviously, is based on the ability for them to not rout. So once morale drops to a certain point, your brigade will rout and run kind of behind the lines, or depending on the strength of it, they may just completely flee the battlefield. Okay, so that's your morale. If you see brigades fleeing the battlefield, they got routed, that's because their morale dropped to a certain point. What affects morale? Number of casualties inflicted, whether they're flanked, so hit from the side or the rear, whether they're charged by a much larger enemy, all those sort of things. You see the arrow up, that's basically caused because we have our general who is there within his little circle. Again, I'm going to focus on this stuff more specifically in future episodes. I'm trying to be as general as I can. And then you're going to have your cover, which is based on where they're standing at. So notice his cover is 33. It's because he's kind of at a tree, but then he's also in the road here. But then you got this guy over here who's in the forest. His cover's 100. The more cover you have, the less casualties you suffer when you're shot at. And then your condition, which is also very important. That's basically how exhausted your army is, or your particular brigade is. Charging is going to lower condition. Fighting in melee is going to lower condition. Moving, running, those sort of things are going to affect your condition. I want to say the number of basically their accuracy is also diminished if their condition is 0. So condition is very important. You obviously want to try and keep that above 0 as much as possible. And then you're going to find though that as the battle progresses, it's going to be really hard to find fresh units unless you're using reserves correctly, which I'll focus on in a later video. I like to focus pretty heavily on this screen here actually while battles are going on because for a couple things. The kills and deaths are kind of interesting but not really important to me unless it's like a skirmishing unit or an artillery unit because I want to kind of assess how effective they're being. You can tell their deaths just by like basically their overall size. Like, hey, I got if he's down to like 300 troops, I'm like, wow, he suffered a lot of casualties. But what I like to look at is this red and this gray. So the red is the reload. So after they discharge their weapon, this red's going to go all the way down to 0, and it's going to slowly build up. So that's going to tell me that they're reloading. That can be helpful, right? Because if you want to like say charge, you want them to get a volley off before you charge. So you're going to wait for them to reload all the way, volley, and then charge. The gray is the amount of ammo that they have in stock. And that's going to be affected by this supply wagon or this little supply depot area. I'm not sure how close they have to be to get this supply here. But like for this guy, the supply wagon, anyone with this ring is going to get resupplied. So this artillery, same thing. They fire off, this gray gets lower. As long as they're within this ring, then they're going to get restocked, and that's going to go back all the way up. So that's what that information there is going to be helpful for you. The middle here, you got, as you can see, it's based on your chain of command. So you've got the entire corps under Protobro Lee. You click that, it's going to highlight everybody on the battlefield, and you can basically take, hey, I want to move everybody. I want to take the entire corps and realign them. So maybe I want to go like this, right? It's going to take all these folks and put them here. All right. Now, if you want to do it by division, which if you remember from the Army Camp screen, we had 2 divisions under the I Corps, you just click it, and it's going to highlight all those units that were under the 1st Division, and then all the units under your 2nd Division. So instead of taking the entire I Corps and going, hey, we want to do this, maybe you want to go say, hey, 1st Division, front line, 2nd Division, you're in the reserve, right? Now, granted, 2nd Division is only an artillery piece and infantry, but that's another way we can do it. So I'll go into more detail in the future, kind of why maybe in your army organization screen you should structure divisions in a certain way, because in battle it may be helpful to do it a certain way. But for purposes of this video, I'm not going to go into it. Just know that you have these different icons, and you click them and highlight, and you can do stuff. By the way, how did I do that? How did I do this right here? Right click, hold down, and then drag up. If you right click and drag down, they're going to look the other way. All right, so up is one way, down is that way. I don't know how to exactly say to remember. Remember, just say you always want to go up, I guess. But that's how you do it. So right click, drag up. There you go. That's for your 1st Division. I Corps. Hey, everybody. Okay. All right. So finally, the last bit of information I want to cover for this video is, well, actually, second to last thing, is if you click your particular brigade or unit, you obviously have this information over here, which we talked about, but you're also going to have the information, the commands for that particular unit. So for the Louisiana Tigers, as you can see, you can halt, which is also spacebar. You can have them double quick, which is R, which is basically running, which is going to burn through their condition very quickly. So you don't really want to do this unless you're trying to basically get to a defensive position before the enemy and you don't really have a choice. But it's pretty killer, so try and avoid it whenever possible. Your charge, which is C, this is a cooldown on this. So after you use it, you can't charge again for, I think it's like a minute or two. So just be aware of that, and it'll just like kind of gradually ungray itself. You're gonna have your fallback, which is your F. That's gonna like have them pull off the front line and just kind of regroup behind your front line. Your combined unit, which I'll talk about in another episode, but you can basically take 2 brigades and combine them into 1, so long as they're not over a particular size. Detach Skirmishers. You can basically take a small portion of the 1,000 troops here in Daniel, for example, and detach them, and then like move them forward as like advanced scouts or whatever. And then to put them back, say these are the detached scouts that you just detached from Daniel. Say you want to put them back in the brigade, you would just undo that. So there we go. And then hold, which can be really helpful, because if they're not on hold fire, then they're either going to shoot at maximum range, which may not be very accurate or effective, or if you're trying to get them like right up close to the enemy, if you don't have them on hold fire, then they're going to stop, fire, move, stop, fire, move. It might be better just to hold fire, move them as close as wherever you want them to go, and then unhold fire, which is H, and have them fire. And then finally withdraw, which is they're going to pretty much leave the battlefield, leave the map. All right, so that's that. And then finally, the topography. Just be aware that different areas of the map have different beneficial effects for you. So the roads are going to move a lot quicker. One of the things that I found frustrating, though, is that when you have them moving along the road, they won't necessarily get out of column formation here and get into or get out of line of battle and get into like column formation. Column, you'll move faster as opposed to line. So if I want them to use a road, for example, I have to like no kidding, click and drag them. There's no option to say, hey, I want you to go from A to B and I want you to use roads. If you want them to use roads, you got to click and drag. Again, left click, hold, and then just guide them. They're going to move a lot quicker than they would otherwise. So let's do this in spacebar to halt, so they're not going to all move. Halt, spacebar. And let's take this guy here, move him here. Can demonstrate just very quickly the speed. So that's one thing you have to kind of be aware of. If you want them to move a particular route, particularly on the road, then you're going to have to click and drag them. They're going to be a little bit quicker. Open fields, obviously, they're still going to move pretty quick. I don't know if there's a way to see speed. Okay, so actually, you know what? So that's speed. But you click him. So speed's 100 on the open field, speed's 100 on the road, but over here, as you can see, speed's only 60. So that'll make a difference, right? If you're like trying to move through like right here, where there's some trees, you're gonna be slower. You're moving through the houses, it can be a little bit slower. Just be aware of that you want to move through open fields or through roads to basically get where you're going, because the infantry are pretty slow. They're gonna take a while to get anywhere if you have them going up hills, through across rivers and lakes, through trees, those sort of things. And so use that accordingly. So that's movement rate. And then finally cover. Your cover is going to be affected by a variety of things. So for example, the housing here, the cover isn't going to be too bad, right? It's going to be, depending on the housing area, more effective than others. So if you're in a city could be up to 100% in cover. Here, if you put him behind this fence line, actually, let me do that. Have him go here, but have him go there, just to kind of demonstrate that. And then, as you can see, he got 100% cover because he's in the tree line. So depending on where you're at on the battlefield might affect the amount of cover you have, which will affect the amount of casualties that you suffer versus the ones you inflict. Because, for example, over here, if we're in the tree line and we're shooting at him in the open field, he's going to suffer a lot more casualties than we are. Because we're in the tree line and he's in the open field. So even if I have green troops up here, it's going to affect things. So let me just fast forward here so I can demonstrate one final thing here for you. Okay. Okay, last thing I want to demonstrate, and I'm going to conclude this video. Obviously, you can see up here in terms of the strategic objectives of the game, of the battle, is up here. But these things right here, these shields, they're defensive spots. And so what happens if you click them, which I did here with Daniel, I right-clicked that shield. He took a defensive position behind this fence line. And I don't think you can do with artillery. No, just infantry. Now notice here, his cover is 25. But if we go left-click, or rather right-click, watch what happens. His cover goes up to 72. Same thing with him, 72. And then we move him off of it, 24. So these are really important. Definitely use them whenever you can. Yeah, it kind of seemed like, hey, if he's just hanging out here, what's the difference? Well, that's the difference. And it doesn't take very long to get them off the defensive position, because watch how long it takes him to get off this position. So he's here. We say, oh no, he's needed elsewhere. He needs to go help out the Louisiana Tigers. Boom. It doesn't take very long for him to regroup and start moving. And then same here, right? He took this kind of L-shaped defensive position because he put him on the little shield. So just be aware of that. And then you're not going to find out what exactly the enemy has without looking down there, but this little mini map's going to tell you, hey, there's a bunch of guys clustering down here. He's got a bunch of cavalry. Okay. You can't click on them, but you can definitely see that the number of troops they have and the amount of experience that they have. Finally, the menu, right? You can do this here. And then there is finally the final screen after the battle's over. It will tell you the casualties you suffered, the amount you inflicted. Kind of go over details about the amount of weapons and stuff you've seized at the end of the battle, and so forth. So that concludes this aspect of the video. And the third video, which will be after this one, is going to have much more kind of in the weeds, down and dirty with regards to different aspects of the game. And that's going to be kind of the theme going forward. I just felt like I felt compelled for those who are new to the game to spend pretty considerable amount of time just going over the general basics of the game, so that you at least understood the kind of the general construct of how the game works. I guess, yeah, I'll probably focus on the battle aspect of it. It's something else I was going to mention. So, finally, if you found this video helpful, or if you guys find this series helpful, it's always helpful to subscribe to the channel. The reason I say that is then, it's going to make it easier for more people to find these videos and perhaps get them enticed to play the game. So, and if you liked it, you found it helpful, you're a new player, and you kind of felt that this overview was helpful, again, like the video. And again, it'll help more people find the game. So, all right, see you guys in the next video.